I was a little bored. I came up with a new game, and this game is called Is It COVID or Is It Government Incompetence? Okay? The object of the game, I'm going to run through some scenarios with you guys, and you need to tell me, is what we're experiencing from the government this massive violation of constitutional rights and freedoms, right? This destruction of small business in Canada, this authoritarian level of governing that we've never seen before, the depression related deaths, opioid overdoses have doubled in 2020. And I want you guys to tell me, based on the information I show you, is it because of COVID or is it because of government incompetence at managing COVID and our healthcare system? First thing I want to show you guys, this is the first piece of information I want to go through. We have total COVID cases that we've identified compared to COVID deaths. And what you see throughout the year, starting in early 2020 all the way up until now, we have a small spike, goes down, big spike, and then really big spike. And at this point in time, in 1 month, we had identified over 200,000 cases of COVID across the country. Interestingly, this blue line here, this is the number of deaths related to COVID cases. And that hasn't changed much through the year. In fact, the month we identified the most cases, over 200,000, we're only down at around 1,200 deaths in that month. Now, what I see here is that there's actually no direct correlation between case counts and deaths. That's what I'm seeing here. No matter what that case count does, you can see it, it's all over the place. Deaths are pretty stable. The deaths do not follow the case counts. Now that tells us a couple things. Firstly, maybe it tells us that we're getting really good at treating people with COVID. Therefore, we're not seeing the number of deaths increase, which is a bonus. That's a good thing. If we're getting better, that's great. It could also be telling us another thing, that there's always been a large number of cases under the surface that we weren't counting. And now that we're identifying them, we're seeing that death count stay the same. So there was always that many cases, and all we're seeing is what we actually get our hands on versus a relatively stable number of deaths. So question, based on this information, do you guys think what we're experiencing is COVID related or government incompetence at managing our healthcare system? Let me know. Okay, second piece of information that I have relating to COVID. Went through all the data for you guys so you don't have to. What you see before you right now is the percentage of deaths related to COVID cases that have been identified, okay? As you can see, early on, that percentage of cases resulting in deaths is through the roof. And right now, when we are in full-on meltdown mode as a country, that percentage is actually the lowest that we've seen since the very beginning. That's right, we're looking at about 0.55% of identified COVID cases resulting in death at this point in time. Now, what does that tell us? Well, we're definitely not identifying all of the COVID cases, okay? We can say that with a high level of certainty. Whatever we're identified, there's way more out there. And if based off of what we're seeing, what we're identifying, we've only got a 0.55% death rate, that's about 0.5%, we're actually doing a pretty good job. COVID's not really hurting a high number of people based on the case count that we're seeing. Interesting, isn't it? So question, based on the shape we're in, based on the absolute meltdown that everybody's got this country convinced we're having right now relating to COVID, is it really that bad? Again, you look at the very end of this graph here, 0.55% of identified cases resulting in death. It's pretty low. It's pretty good. We're seeing the lowest percentage of deaths versus case counts right now. So again, the question being, is what we are experiencing is the destruction of our country, the destruction of the futures of our children. Is it because of COVID? Or is it because of sheer government incompetence at managing our healthcare system? Let me know, guys. I got one more to show you, and this one's pretty interesting. Now, this one here, this isn't the whole country. This is Alberta. I decided to take what is believed to be the absolute worst COVID performance in the entire world at this point in time and only look at that data, okay? So all you see right here is bed counts in Alberta. So the first bar you see, we have a combined amount of acute care beds and ongoing care beds in Alberta in our hospitals of roughly 36,000. That's right. That is 27,000 ongoing care beds and over 8,500 acute care beds. Okay? What do we have for hospitalizations now? It's about 650. But that's not ICU, that's just general hospitalizations for COVID. In a system with 36,000 beds, we're apparently breaking down. We're apparently on the edge because of 650 cases of COVID in hospital beds. Seems kind of weird, doesn't it? That's what I thought when I read it. But it gets more interesting. Next, we look at our ICU beds, okay? Now, we've got very few ICU beds on paper in Alberta, okay? We're looking at, I saw anywhere from 270 to 280. So let's say we've got like 270 ICU beds that we have access to treat people in Alberta. We've got about 155 of them occupied with COVID patients right now. Now, Jason Kenney very recently said, we're able to up that to like 400 beds, but we don't want to get anywhere near that 400. And I agree. We don't want the ICU filled up with COVID patients. Absolutely not. However, if you rewind, if you go back to last April, the UCP had a good plan. They had a plan to deal with a spike in COVID cases. They had a plan to increase the number of ICU beds that we have access to from roughly 270 up to over 1,300. And that was just by transitioning different types of facilities into ICU care facilities. That was their plan. They stated it. You can look it up. They were going to increase it by over 1,080 ICU beds. But that never materialized. That never happened. That was their plan, but they never did it. So just imagine the shape we would be in if they met their commitment to increase the number of ICU beds from 270-ish all the way up to over 1,300, and we had 155 cases in there. Just think about it. We'd be in pretty good shape right now, wouldn't we? So based on this information, and again, keep in mind it relates only to Alberta, are we dealing with a problem with COVID, or are we dealing with a problem of government incompetence at managing our healthcare system? Let me know, guys. Let me know. Now, I want to look at one more piece of information here. This is the first graph I showed you guys, okay? First graph. Look at it. Look at, as time goes on, look at the COVID case counts. Look at the increase. Look at the spikes. This is throughout all of Canada, by the way. This isn't just us redneck, dirty Albertans not following the rules. This is the whole country. Look at how much it's increased. And what's happened on that timeline? We have firmed up on COVID restrictions. We have firmed up on lockdowns. We've done way more to prevent transmission of COVID. But what the hell's going on here? We've seen massive increases in COVID cases. So what does that tell you about what we're seeing? What does that tell you about this violation of our constitutional rights? What does that tell you about the destruction of small business, the mental health crisis that is brewing, the destruction of our children's futures? What does this tell you? Well, I'll tell you what it tells me. It tells me that a lot of it is in vain. We're doing all this stuff. And look at it. It's not doing anything. It's getting worse. The harder we go on restrictions, the more we clamp down, the worse it gets. That's the correlation you can draw from that information right there. So that's it, guys. That's my new game. Is it COVID or is it government incompetence? I really want you to review this information I showed you. Watch this video again. Go through all the information. That is government sourced data. That's not just stuff that I picked out of the clouds and just came up with on my own. That's government sourced statistical data that I pulled. And that's what I saw when I pulled it. That's all the comparisons. That's what you see when you take the data and you analyze it. So you tell me, all of the pain we're experiencing as Albertans, as Canadians, this absolute destruction of our country, this huge, massive mental health crisis that is just brewing under the surface right now, is it because of COVID? Or is it because of sheer government incompetence? And now I'm not saying pick sides. I'm calling out the UCP, the Conservatives, the Liberals, the NDP, and the Greens. They're all responsible for this. They're all on board. Anybody who's not speaking out against the destruction of Canada is on board with it. If you guys think, based on this information, it's sheer government incompetence that's caused this problem for us, call it out. Reach out to your MPs. Let them know what you heard. Let them know what you're seeing and ask them how they're going to fix it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the game. I had fun making it up. Not going to lie. It's pretty enjoyable to look at information like this and actually reach some pretty sound conclusions.